The Lumia 830 and the Lumia 930, two of the last devices to have the Nokia brand name on them. I'm Cam from PhoneDog.com and we're going to be checking out the differences between the two devices and hopefully answering whether or not it's worth paying more for the 930. Now, looking at the design first, the Lumia 830 is 2.5mm taller and 1.5mm thinner than the Lumia 930. It also weighs about 17 grams less. But in design, at least from the front and on the surface, it looks almost identical to the 930, but when you get in close you do see a few differences. It has a similar metal chassis with Corning Gorilla Glass 3 on the front, and it also has the same flat edges, and the same physical buttons all along the right hand edge for your volume, power and camera. But if you look closely at the glass, you'll see that the 930 has a more angular taper towards the edges, whereas the Lumia 830's glass has a very slight curve. The 830 has its micro USB port on the top, while the 930 has its SIM tray, which is removable from the top edge. But the biggest differences are when you turn it round to the back. The Lumia 830's camera and LED flash are embedded in this round glass panel, and that's because the back is removable. It's a removable plastic shell, and when you remove it you get access to your micro SD expandable memory. You also get access to your interchangeable battery and your SIM card slot. But both come in bright colours and both of them feel incredibly well made, solid and durable. And despite its removable back, the 830 doesn't feel any less solid than the 930. But because it's slimmer, it does feel much nicer in hand. If we move on to the displays, both of them are 5-inch panels. The 830 has a 720p LCD clear black display, whereas the Lumia 930 has a 1080p AMOLED display. Now there are differences. Obviously it sounds like one should be incredibly sharp compared to the other one, but really you don't notice that. When you're looking at text or images, both of them look pretty much as sharp as each other. Because the 830 is only about 6 pixels per inch short of the magic 300 number that we all talk about a lot. The Lumia 930 has over 400 pixels per inch, but really you don't see that much. And that's almost certainly because it's AMOLED versus LCD. And now that does make a difference in terms of colours as well. What you'll notice on the 930 is that the colours are a lot more vibrant, sometimes a little bit oversaturated, and the whites are warmer. Whereas on the LCD panel on the Lumia 830, the whites are much cooler, maybe a little bit too cool. Sometimes the colours come across as being a little bit faded and not given enough life. But it's still a good display. And of the two, I actually prefer the LCD panel. I prefer the cooler to the warmer. The cameras are different too, and this is perhaps the one area where the 930 properly outshines the 830. It's a 20 megapixel pure view lens, but it's not just more pixels. It's a bigger sensor size and the pixels are actually bigger. And what that means is they can capture more light and more detail, and you can actually choose to save the files at a much higher file size, or much higher resolution. So when you're looking at them, they don't seem as digital, if that makes sense. It's a more natural picture, more sharpness. That said, the 10 megapixel camera on the 830 is fantastic. They both are, in fact, and most of that's down to the manual controls you get with the Lumia phones. If you've got the time and the energy to sit through and make sure all your settings are manually set to be ideal for whatever situation you're in, you can create fantastic images. And if you can keep your hand really still or mount it to a tripod, you can get some brilliant shots in low light. You can create all sorts of effects like light trails with cars or writing with light yourself. Now looking at the performance and the battery life, again there's a lot of difference in terms of specifications. The 830 has a Snapdragon 400 quad-core processor. The Lumia 930 has a Snapdragon 800 processor, and it's 2.2 GHz versus 1.2 GHz, 2 GB of RAM versus 1 GB of RAM, 30 GB of storage versus 16 GB of inbuilt storage. Here's where they differ. The 830 lets you expand that storage up to an extra 128 GB, so it gives you that extra flexibility. And in actual daily use, loading apps, switching between screens, using the device for everything that you want to use it for, the 830 doesn't feel that much slower than the 930. In fact, I didn't notice it to be any slower at all. And when it comes to batteries, you would expect the lower capacity battery to perform worse than the higher one, but that's actually not the case. Because the screen pixels are more dense on the 930 and because the processor is a lot more powerful, it uses more battery juice, so you actually get more battery life out of the 2200 mAh battery in the 830. And that's despite the fact that it's more than 200 mAh off the capacity of the 930. What that means in actual daily use is that you should get an extra few hours of standby time, or at least an extra few hours between charges. Both devices are easy to charge, they've got wireless charging capabilities built in, so out of the two devices I actually prefer the Lumia 830, and that's mostly because of the price. There is quite a big difference in what you would spend to buy an 830 outright compared to a 930. It's thinner, feels nicer in hand, more versatile because you can expand the storage and swap batteries. It performs just as well in most tasks. In fact, the only way it really falls short is in the camera. I've been Cam from PhoneDog.com. I'm at PhoneDog_Cam on Twitter. Let us know what you think of the latest two Lumia devices. Use the comments below, get me on Twitter if you want to, and I will see you again soon.